Good evening. "365 days. 365 days. An entire year has gone by since the day that changed our world forever. A year of the unthinkable. A year of terrible, terrible loss. A year when families were torn apart. A year of a pain so deep that words can barely express. I'm sure every one of us clearly remembers exactly where we were 1 year ago when we were first hearing news of what happened, and hearing how our brothers and sisters have been taken from us in the cruelest ways imaginable. I remember that holiday morning, exactly 1 year ago. I was standing right here at this podium. Now, although then we didn't really have a full idea of what was going on, we actually had no clue what was really going on. What we were hearing already then was terrible enough. Stories of terrorists invading Israel, of a dining hall full of hostages in the kibbutz. And then we were hearing reports of at least 40 dead. As I spoke that morning before the Yizkor service, I threw away the speech that I had planned to say. I stood here and I cried. Hearing about our brothers and sisters. And since that Simchat Torah morning, all the pain, and during all the pain of the last 365 days, with all of the bad news that we've suffered, something remarkable has emerged. Our nation and our community has stood together with such unbelievable unity in shared brokenness, in shared prayers, and in a shared support for our family in the Holy Land. These past 365 days, our people have truly shown the beauty of Am Yisrael. Just here in our community, every week we're sending food to Shabbat dinners to soldiers in Israel. I didn't know who they were. I just felt we needed to do something. Over the Torah till Hanukkah, we sent almost $10,000. And tonight, that Asaf, who's our guest speaker, who was connected to me through a mutual friend, Albin Beth Kava, that used to live here in Coral Springs. And I was sending her money. She was giving it to soldiers, and she called up Asaf and said, there's a community in Coral Springs that wants to send you Shabbat dinner for your entire battalion, your entire unit. And they were enjoying a Shabbat dinner that we here paid for. This is the beauty and the power of our nation that stands together. This is what it means when we say, Am Yisrael Chai. And so during this past year, when over 26,000 rockets and missiles have been launched at our homeland from all sides, when 760-something soldiers have died defending our homeland, in a year that we can't stop thinking about the 101 innocent people still being held captive in the dark underground tunnels of Gaza, we think about the hundreds of thousands of families that are displaced and not living in their homes, the thousands more whose sons and brothers and husbands and fathers are currently serving in the army. During all of this, we have seen such unbelievable acts of kindness and strength that truly embody who we are. Communities coming together like never before, and we see those who refuse to give in to despair, who rise with hope, who rise with compassion and a commitment to ensuring that we will come through this. And we, my friends, are witnessing Am Yisrael Chai. Tonight, the crowd in this room that we're putting on our chairs, over 200 people in this room right now. And how many people are watching online? And you are, every one of you, you are a living proof and a living testament to the fact that Am Yisrael Chai. My friends, we are a nation that survives by thriving and by holding on tightly to one another in the darkest of times, finding light even in the darkest, in the deepest nights. So thank you, all of you, for coming out, for showing your love, for showing your support, for showing your care for the people of Israel, for showing your Jewish pride, for showing your neshama. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And of course, a special thank you to all the sponsors of tonight's event who joined us before, and to every one of you that donated to make tonight possible. Thank you very much for partnering with us and enabling this beautiful memorial and commemoration for October 7th. Big thank you to Asaf and to Esti for making the journey from Israel all the way here special for tonight's evening. Not easy leaving behind your 3 kids, being with us on this very important day. We thank you for that. A thank you to Chaya Yaris from the Chabad Israeli community for helping us organize this. And a huge thank you to Yaron and to Nofar, who really, as always, went above and beyond, making tonight the beautiful event that it will be. It is now my honor to call up our mayor, Mayor Scott Brook, to offer us greetings on behalf of the city of Coral Springs, following which my colleague, Rabbi Moshe Yaris, will lead us in the prayers and the Kilmali and the rest of the evening.
Thank you, So, Rabbi, I'm glad that I got the blue suit, white shirt, blue tie memo. So I didn't intend to start my greetings with humor. But I think in these times of darkness, we have to bring the light. We have to be the light. And we need to be so in a united front as the Jews that we are. Long before I was a mayor, I went to yeshiva in Washington Heights. And Judaism is a great part of me. And I have deep, deep, deep faith in our nation and in us. I want to thank Rabbi Denberg and the leadership of Chabad to invite me to share the greetings with you for this evening. I am very happy to see all of you on this important evening as we continue to move forward with love, kindness, passion, and compassion for our nation. Am Yisrael Chai. God bless each of you. Thank you for giving me the honor and privilege to give the greetings tonight on behalf of the city of Coral Springs. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I would like to ask everyone to please stand up for a moment of silence to honor the memory of those we have lost. On each seat, there is a paper with the name of a civilian who was killed. Please have him or her in mind. The moment of silence will be culminating by blowing of the shofar by Rabbi Yossi Denberg of Chabad of Coral Springs. You may be seated. As we gather today, we remember not only the loss, but also the courage and bravery of those we lost and we loved. On this day, we honor Raz Peretz, Or Mansour, Bar Rosenstein, Hashem Yikom Damam, 3 soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice while bravely protecting their friends and the Jewish people. I would like to invite and Liad Negri to join me as we light a candle in memory of their cousin, Raz Peretz. Raz was the commander of the Palsam in the 51st Battalion in the Golani Brigade. While the terrorists were attacking his base on October 7th, Raz charged at them from the entrance of the room and saved the lives of the other soldiers who were there. I would like to invite Mrs. Miri Aharon to join me as we light a candle in memory of a close family friend, Bar Rosenstein. Bar was a fighter of the 51st Battalion in the Golani Brigade. He was at his base in the south on October 7th. He and his friends left the base as the rockets started coming from Gaza. But very quickly, they made the decision not to run for their lives, but to go and defend civilians in the surrounding Yishuvim. Bar was killed while fighting the terrorists. I would like to invite Mrs. Nofar Levin to join me at the candle in memory of a close family friend, O Mansour. O was killed just a few days ago, last Wednesday, actually, on the northern border of Israel while fighting in Lebanon. He and other soldiers were going house to house in one of the villages on the border of Israel and Lebanon. First, and was killed while his friends were fighting the terrorists for 8 hours to make sure that his body comes back to Israel and gets buried. Please join me here as we light the candles in their memory and in the memory of all soldiers and civilians that we have lost in this past year. Thank you. Everyone, please rise again for the prayer of Kel Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim shochen bamromim המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים טהורים וגיבורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמות כל אחינו ואחיותינו הקדושים, אנשים, נשים וטף, זקנים עם נערים, שנרצחו בארצנו על קידוש השם. בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעילוי נשמתם, לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ויעמדו לגורלם לקץ הימין, ונאמר אמן. A prayer for the success of the soldiers of the IDF. May it be fulfilled quickly, speedily, with a complete victory over our enemies. I would like to call Rabbi Friedman to say a chapter of Tehillim for the immediate release of the hostages and for the safety of all those in Israel. On each seat, there is a card with a Tehillim chapter and a name and picture of one of the hostages. Please have them in mind while reciting the prayer.
Amnatseach, Mizmer LeDavid, Yamcha Adonai, B'Yom Tzara, Yisagefcha, Shem Elehei Yaakov, Yishlach Ezracha, Mikodesh, Umitzion, Yisadeka, Yiskor, Kol Minchotecha, Ve'iloscha, Yedashne Sela, Yiten Lecha Chilvavecha, Cholatzoscha Yimale, Niranana Bishuasecha, Uveshem Eloheinu Nidgoil, Yimale Adonai Kol Mish'alei Secha. Ata Yodaiti Ki Hoshia Adonai Meshichoi Ya'anehu Mishmei Kotshoi Bigvurois Yesha Yiminoi Elev Arechev Ve'elev Asusim Va'anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir Hema Koru V'Nafolu Va'anachnu Kamnu V'Nisoidod Adonai Hoshia Amelach Ya'anenu V'Yoim Koreinu. I'll say the first two verses and the last three verses of the chapter in English. For the conductor, a psalm by David. May the Lord answer you on the day of distress. May he send your help from the sanctuary and support you from Zion. Some rely upon chariots and some upon horses, but we rely upon and invoke the name of the Lord our God. They bend and fall, but we rise and stand firm. Lord, deliver us. May the King answer us on the day we call.
Thank you. As we reflect on the devastating events, we will be joined by a special guest speaker, Sergeant Major Asaf Salomon, a member of the IDF Search and Rescue Team, who will share with us firsthand accounts of the destruction he saw as he spent months after October 7th working in the southern kibbutzim, recovering remains of the deceased, documenting the destruction, and preserving the memories and personal belongings for the families of those murdered. Please join me in welcoming Asaf, who flew in from Israel to be with us on this occasion.
Shalom. I'd like to first thank you. Thank all of you for coming here tonight and allowing me to be and share these moments with you. I know I was introduced as a position in the Army, but the truth is I'm not a career Army person. I'm a tour guide. I live in Jerusalem. Esty, my wife, joined me. We have 3 kids back home in Jerusalem. Not easy to leave them at this time, but I felt it's important enough to come and share the stories of what we've experienced in Israel over the past year. It's been a year. And I will try and do that through the experiences I went through with our family and friends and community throughout the country of Israel. On October 7th, maybe I'll start actually a moment before that. In the past 15 years, I was in reserves since I finished my Army duty. I joined the search and rescue only about a year and a half ago. So just before the war, I was getting into a new position in a new unit for me. And when the war broke out, October 7th, there was a lot of confusion. It's working. I was sitting in the living room with our two young boys. They wake up early, and 6:30 in the morning we had sirens. Now, we know in Jerusalem that's very unusual. So I take my phone with me, even though it's a holiday, it's Shabbat and a Chag. But I take my phone with me, waiting to see what happens. We didn't have the news on, we don't have TV. And there's a lot of confusion throughout the day. What is going on? What are the numbers? What's going on there? At first, I call the commander of the unit and he says, we're search and rescue. We come after. We don't know what's going on, and I wait. The next day, still rockets, still sirens. I went to a funeral in Mount Herzl. You can see people ducking between the graves. There was a funeral every hour. And during the funerals, there were still sirens. And I call at a certain point, I call the commander and I say, what's going on? He says, just come. And I go and join the unit, and I get filled in on what they've been doing. And because I was kind of floating, so I joined different teams. And in a way, I kind of got to see a broad and close picture of the events of that day and the time that followed. When I first arrived in Be'eri, in Kibbutz Be'eri, we're driving down the streets. We see the burnt cars. Some of the cars weren't burnt. The boot was open, the back of the car was open. And I see everything thrown around, and they're missing the tires. And it's not one car. It's another car, another car. We're trying to understand what's going on. And we see that the terrorists took the tires from those cars to use them to torch the homes. So when they enter the homes, some of these homes, they broke in, they threw grenades, bombs, they shot RPGs through the doors, they shot through the doors of the safe rooms. And when they couldn't get into the safe room, they just burnt the house. And as we're going through, we try and think where to find these people. What didn't we do yet? So we start searching in garbage bins. Maybe someone was hiding. Maybe we haven't found. We're going under bushes, following smell. The feeling of looking for something that you don't really want to find. I'm dreading of finding what I'm looking for. And the work that we did at the beginning when we were going through the homes, forgive me for the description, maybe it's a very technical job. You're trying to avoid the pictures that are on the refrigerators in the house. You don't want to see the faces of the family in this house. I'm following smell. I'm following flies. Trying to find remains of homes, walking through homes that the people just sat there the evening before and had a holiday meal. They left, some of them leave the dishes for the morning to be washed. So the dishes are still in the sink, some food. Maybe someone sat down for breakfast. Some of the homes, the air conditioning was still blowing air. And that was the feeling as we go through the homes. If you look at this picture, you'll see that the clock stopped at 8:30. And that is the feeling when we go through the different homes here and start to understand really what's going on. We're starting to gather and understand the picture. The destruction here was not part of in modern warfare or Western. You fight a war in order to achieve points or territory or gain. There's a reason. What was going on here was destruction in the name of destruction. One of the things that hit me was outside a house. They broke into in the garden, like the shed. They took out a chainsaw. And the chainsaw is left by the cut down tree. I asked myself, why, in the midst of all of this, go in and cut down a tree? Well, it's time for that. There's things to steal. There's everything that they did. But for me, inside, I understood there's a deeper hatred inside here. When the Nova Party, when they arrive there at night, they understand within a short time that all the piles or the fires we see afar are piles of bodies that were burnt. The idea of dehumanizing and getting rid of every evidence of humanity. That is the type of war we encountered on October 7th. I took this picture. It's the same house, but a couple of months apart. The first picture on the right is a house where Hamas terrorists walked around with graffiti, with spray. They marked the homes they visited. Not to waste time, move on to the next house. This house was dealt with. On some of them, they wrote their names of their teams. This is Hamas. Other units, some of them just wrote their names on the walls. Underneath it, a soldier added, Am Yisrael Chai. Fast forward, a month later, you can see part of the story. The red graffiti is our unit, the search and rescue, with international signs. The house was searched and cleared 3 times. It's the work that the unit trains. Nobody trained for something like this. And once the house was searched, there was another search that was conducted. Those are the 2 letters on the left. It says Resh and Ayin. Resh Ayin stands for Rashut Atikot, the Antiquity Authority. I studied archaeology in university. Nobody studied to do this. They had to bring in the Antiquity Authority to sift through the ashes in some of these homes, to find and identify the remains of some of the people who were not found. Part of the work we did in search and rescue was a list. Say as a soldier at the time, and in the last year, I spent half of it in uniform. And I'm not in a career army. But there's a feeling, even though it wasn't my job, on October 7th, I was home. But it happened in our time. And there's a sense of responsibility, and I would even say shame, walking around a bit in uniform at the time. And we couldn't stop this, but let's try and give some closure to the families. Let's try and find something to bury. Move someone from a list of missing to a list of kidnapped or dead. But try and bring some certainty in the situation, at least in the first days when there was uncertainty. You know that 251 people were kidnapped. This is Dani from Kibbutz Kisufim. They identified his only daughter and her husband. These are the stories that happened on October 7th. The bomb shelters that are spread all over the south in the Gaza envelope were placed there over the last, assuming almost 20 years. People have been living under the threat of rockets, and in order to answer that, the army, the Home Front Command, have placed these bomb shelters to offer security. So not only in the homes and in the towns, but also along the roads, as you drive down through the Gaza envelope. These bomb shelters were placed next to bus stops, next to places people go for hikes in nature, in some cases. They placed these, and over the years, they were painted in color, all kind of smiling kids and flowers and animals, birds. On October 7th, people driving on these roads, when they hear the rockets, they got out of their cars and went to these bomb shelters. People who were running away from the Nova Party found refuge in these bomb shelters just to turn them into death places. The terrorists of Hamas shot RPGs and threw grenades and shot. These were some of the hardest places for the rescuers to look in. And some of these 30 people were hiding. One of the famous stories is about a hero, a 22-year-old hero called Anir Shapira, who stood at the entrance to one of the bomb shelters and threw out 7 grenades. He caught them and threw them out, but at the 8th, he was killed. After a few weeks, we had a change of mission. Most of the bodies were retrieved. And we got an order from the commander to do something very different. This time we were going to the homes that were destroyed. Some of these homes were destroyed because there was fighting with terrorists. In some of these homes, they held hostages. In some of these homes, they stood for hours fighting, and eventually the army knocked the houses down on them. And some of these homes had no one to come back to. And the mission we got was to go through the homes and try and save some of the memories. October, November in Israel, that's the beginning of the rainy season. And before the rains come down, we were thinking, what can we save from these homes? When I guide, it's hard to separate your daily job from what you do also in the army. But when I guide, one of the questions they bring up is, what does someone take from his home when he leaves in a hurry? When you go through archaeological sites, that's everything that you see. In Jerusalem, what does a nation leave behind when we run away and escape? And here it became a real question. What do I say from these homes? What is precious for people? This is a house that 2 months later, I met the people from this house, and he shared pictures of his beautiful house before. In one of the houses we were sitting and going through, I describe it, but basically most of the house was destroyed. There were walls, some of the walls remaining. There was a big stain of blood on the couch. And this time we go into these homes and we're trying to dive into every house story. We're not ignoring the pictures on the wall, but we're actually looking at them and trying to think, what would these people want to say from their home? Who are these people who were here? What certificates, what papers would they need, or their relatives? What do they want? This man was a photographer. He had piles of albums. And in one house, they had all kinds of letters that were sent. And in this house we were going through, and as I said, there is a big stain of blood on the couch, and we don't know what happened to the house owner. We start to go through the papers that we find in the living room, and we learn this is an 86-year-old woman born in Hungary. And we find all kinds of papers about her son who won a running contest in the kibbutz when he was a child. And she was a painter. There were beautiful paintings all over the wall. Many of them had holes in them from shrapnel. So we started taking those off and folding them. Does she need books? Books, that's something you can buy. We don't have time to pack that. Shabbat candlesticks, yes. And this is the job we do. We go through the homes. And in this specific home, suddenly we see a man coming. He's half army dressed. He's wearing army pants, but an orange vest on top. And this guy is walking towards us, and we ask him, who are you? He says, I'm from the Home Front Command. We look at each other and say, we're the Home Front Command. He says, okay, I came through the fields, I snuck in. This is still a closed military zone at that point. There's still rockets going on and sirens. And he says, this is my mother's home. She's in the hotel by the Dead Sea. She has an amazing story on its own. After 36 hours, the bloodstain in the living room is a terrorist that was killed by a special unit. There was battles through, it was 4 homes in Be'eri where the hostages were. There was a big battle that took place there for hours. And she got trapped in the safe room. And the door was locked. She fainted in the safe room. And after 36 hours, she climbed out through the window. And she was met by the soldiers who were surprised to see her and took her. She's safe. And he said, yes, all these things are great. That's what she wanted. But she also needs some of her books. So we helped him. We sat down for 2 more hours. We helped him. There were hugs and a lot of support. And we helped him pack their stuff and put it in his car. We had a family from Kfar Aza who turned to us. They weren't in their house. They weren't around that weekend. And terrorists took control. And there was a battle. Soldiers were killed around the house. And eventually the house was knocked down. And they came to us with a request. We were getting requests from people saying, from our house, if you can find In their house specifically, they wanted marriage certificates, a few other documents that they needed, and Chanukiah, Hanukkah menorah, down in their families since 1800 from Holland. And we found it. And again, being a tour guide looking for a story, I thought this is appropriate. So I sent my pictures to the spokesperson of the unit and the IDF, and it turned to be a nice article because they actually lit this Chanukiah on Hanukkah, on the 8th candle at the community of Kfar Aza. And for me, that was part of the story. What can we do now? Why did it happen? We'll have many years to discuss. What do we do now? And I feel like I couldn't go on without this next part of the story. While we were going through all of these stories and going back and forth to the kibbutzim, I was getting hundreds of messages. I think this is just one kind of accumulation I did, but I was getting hundreds of messages on my phone, on social media, from people I guided. Someone messaged me, I was on your birthright group 15 years ago, 12 years ago. An Irish guy I traveled with in 2010 after the army, Israelis go on this trip, I was traveling in Africa. I met this guy, he says, "You're the only Israeli I know. How are you?" People I guided just a month before that were sending me, "How are you?" For some people, this would look like it's just a text message. It's just a few words. But I can't tell you how much this meant to us. To know that someone from outside is thinking about us, that we're not alone in the story. When people were telling me that they're going to Washington and I should look at it, I opened on my phone and I saw this gathering of 300,000 Jews in Washington, D.C. 300,000 Jews showed up for Miluim in Israel. An incredible number, first time in the history of the state of Israel. I'm not an expert on American Jewish history, but I think it's also one of these historical moments when the people came together. And what's amazing about this is if you think of the year before this in Israel, we were arguing. The Jewish people, Israel, we were arguing amongst ourselves, standing on different sides, demonstrating how is this country going to look like? Will you be able to have on Yom Kippur prayers in main streets in Israel? Simchat Torah is supposed to be the peak of this. Will we be having dances with Sefer Torah in the streets of Israel? And people were so polarized, but suddenly we find ourselves together. I remember we got deliveries of cakes, but food was a big thing in these meetings. I think every soldier came back with a few extra kilos. We got these deliveries of cakes. And on the cake it said, "Dear soldier, our house isn't kosher, but all the ingredients in this cake are dairy or kosher, or we made our oven kosher for this." I'm thinking to myself, a week ago, people couldn't speak to each other. And suddenly they're sending in cakes and saying, "You make your decision, we're okay with whatever you decide. But just so you should know, we thought about you." And that is the feeling we had when this all started. When one evening we were told there's a group of people who are coming to barbecue for you, to grill. That was great, more food, right? I'll say we had food in the army, but it's always better to get a nice warm dish, burger, whatever it is. But the people who were grilling were speaking English. And that was a surprise. Because to hear English, wait a moment, what are you guys doing here? You come. It's easy to send money and say, "Guys, enjoy." But some people actually got on an airplane and flew all the way into Israel, into a war zone. Later on, I was guiding missions myself from mid-December. And I was turning to people and say, "You guys are crazy. There's a war somewhere in the world. Nobody gets on an airplane and looks for every flight he can get. How can I get into the war zone? And when I arrive already, how can I get the closest there is to where the war is happening? I want to meet these soldiers." I'm telling you, from the side of the soldiers, this was amazing. This allowed us to suddenly lift up our heads and say, wow, we are part of a greater story than just what's happening here. We're not alone. I was telling a lot of these missions who asked me, what should we bring for the soldiers? I said, it doesn't matter what you bring, it's how you bring it. Just showing up, sending something. That Friday night meal we got from you guys, I can tell you it was special. Actually, the first Friday night we had was a very special moment for me because the commander of the unit, maybe I'll go a few months before that, I guide soldiers when I'm not in the army. We do Shabbatot, Friday night at the Western Wall. We do discussions on values with different groups of commanders. And on August and September, I had once a month I had this Shabbat. And we stood at the Western Wall. I was leading a Shabbat. There were other guys I was in charge of leading this Shabbat with 215 commanders to be. And we went to the Western Wall Friday night with dancing. And there were thousands of Jews from all over the world there who came, and birthright groups. And it was the biggest circle I saw in the Western Wall before Shabbat. And I've been doing this for about 15 years. And we're all singing, the most popular song there is Am Yisrael Chai. And the first Shabbat, when everybody came from their different tasks, the commander of that Shabbat meal stood up, and I'm saying it's an older unit. It's everybody's reservists there. Some people are engineers, doctors, all kinds of positions. And he told everybody, please stand up. He said a few words on Parashat Shavua. They're not religious, most of these people, or many of them. But he asked everybody to put their hands on the shoulders of whoever's next to them and sing Am Yisrael Chai. And for me, that threw me back to those moments at the Western Wall. And understanding this is a much greater story. When we had groups of missions, of volunteers, of people who came, as I said, flying into a war zone, trying to help with whatever they could. Even when they don't know how to pick oranges, they tried. And the farmers would get them, even though they know they might break and some cause more damage than help with their experience. But to see the faces of the farmers, the faces of the soldiers, the wounded soldiers in the hospitals, to see the people from outside Israel coming and saying, we're here with you. I don't know if I have any more words I can say to stress how special these moments were. I put the pictures, we got piles of letters from kids, some in English, some of the soldiers couldn't even read them. They pretended like they're reading it. It's in English. No, I can say this joke because I'm in infantry and the infantry soldiers are not the pilots. Okay, there's different levels in the army. You can barely read Hebrew. But we could all see Am Yisrael Chai and feel the love. I put it on the right as a picture my kids sent us. Also to the soldiers, look after yourselves. And it was hanging there. We had it on walls, in the war rooms, in different places where we could, to remind ourselves why we're doing what we're doing. And actually, I was asking myself, what is bringing you guys? What does someone from Florida have to do with someone in Israel? Why would they send us? What's the connection between us? And they said, oh, we're Jewish. We came. Is Judaism a religion? Is it a race? Is it a culture? What puts us together? It's not either of these, and it's all of these, right? It's part of them. I don't know. But the answer I got is mishpocha. Means family. We all have our ancestors. And in family, you can think different, you can look different, you can marry into a family, but there's something that connects you to one another. And that's the feeling we had when we received all these goods and support. And I feel it goes both ways. We feel that, we need you as much as I feel like you need us. Israel is there to make sure Jews around the world are safe. They have where to come to. And in Israel, we feel like we need you. The help and the support, whether it's financial, political, or moral, but to know that we're not alone. And I felt this is such a strong and special connection. So I had to put this in as part of our story of the last year. Another chapter of the story is the young adult generation in Israel. You know, we call them in Israel, every soldier looks at the young soldiers and says, these guys, they're made of sugar. They melt in rain, right? All kind of, I guess in Hebrew it works better. But we call them the TikTok generation. And in 2014, they were the WhatsApp generation. And when I explain this to the soldiers I guide, I say, you know, we're not saying this out of pride. It's not the high tech that we're looking at. We're saying these soldiers are absorbed by their phones and screens. They don't know how to talk to each other. They're focused on here, quick, right, short, click bites. That's what interests them. They won't stand the war. And we were proved totally wrong. These young adults, young people in Israel, men and women, are amazing. We call them the generation of victory, Dor HaNitzachon. I'm standing here with soldiers I was guiding on the right. These are Golani soldiers. They're 18, 19, 20 years old from the 13th Battalion who were in the bases around Gaza on October 7th. They lost many friends. They went into fight. They lost over 70 soldiers from this unit. And these guys know why they're there. They're focused. They're willing to fight. They know what's the right thing that they need to do. I took this picture in one of the homes in Be'eri, 3 days into the war. I remember when I was guiding soldiers before, one of the officers told us, I want you to speak to these soldiers as if this is the last thing they hear before they go to war. And we were like, yeah. And here I felt it. We're speaking to these soldiers as if this is the last words they hear before going into war. Look at their faces. When I guide them, I ask them where their grandparents are from. And the answers we get in Israel of the 18, 19-year-olds, their grandparents are from East Europe, West Europe, North Africa, Asia, Iraq, Iran, Ethiopia, India. It's the story of Israel. And these guys embody that story. When I was guiding soldiers, again, I'm going back to the summer of honest question, 2023, September, I spoke to this unit and I told them the story of one of the heroes of 1948. A guy who was a soldier in the Haganah, an engineer, he has a street named after him in Jerusalem. In 1973, when the Yom Kippur War broke out, he was not in the army, but he drove up to the Golan Heights and saved people, injured soldiers in his own car. Uriel Chefetz, a hero. In 1974, the year later, there was a terror attack in Ma'alot, and he drove there to save people in his car. And I turned to the soldiers and I say, why does he do that? They say, oh, because he's a generation of 1948. It's like a term. The people who knew what it is not to have a state of Israel and what it is to have a state. It means the state is sitting on their shoulders here. And if they don't do it, nobody else will. And then I turn the question to these young soldiers, commanders to be. I say, how do you pass this on to the generation of 2023? That the state is here. That if they don't do it, nobody else will. And we got an answer. We got an answer from these amazing young people in Israel who stood up to the task, who spent months in Gaza without their phones, fighting for the right thing, for the right cause. They know why they're there. And a friend told us this a few weeks ago when she came to Israel. It feels like a memorial hall. When you walk through Israel, there's pictures of hostages everywhere. There's these stickers, bumper stickers everywhere. When I was a kid, bumper stickers were a thing. You have slogans on them. Cars were filled with them, but they disappeared. But now they're back. They're everywhere. I took these pictures in the shuk in Jerusalem, in the market, on a door, on everywhere. When you look close at these bumper stickers, you see faces of young people who were killed in the last year. And many of them have quotes. I put here some heroes. Some of them you might recognize. Some heroes from the last year, and to me it brings up this question of who's a hero. But I want to focus on, there's Matan and Rami, people that I got to meet who saved their families or saved other people, went to check on their neighbors. Some of these people were killed. The guy in the middle is Dekel Suissa, a Golani 13 officer, where I was exposed to a story in the base I was sitting in a base called Paga. It's about half a mile from the border of Gaza. And I spent a few weeks there, and I learned his story. Dekel was a 22-year-old guy. He's the commander of this base on October 7th. There are 25 soldiers, and they were attacked by 150 terrorists that morning. And out of the 25 soldiers, 15 were killed, including Dekel Suissa, the officer. He was recognized because of the ranks. He's the only one who had ranks. And he spoke to the young soldiers and he said, "We're Golani and we're going to fight to the last blood drop. You're going to have to fight. Why do you need to mention the name of the unit?" But he understood something. The spirit is important. You see the quotes that he has on the stickers they made. It says, "Don't forget to smile when you wake up in the morning." Lessons from 22-year-olds. You can do something, you can, how does it go? You can do, live your life or do something great. And these are the young people in Israel today, the generation of victory. On that base, the Torah has a special story. The morning they were attacked with 150 terrorists. There were battles for hours, the whole day. They were fighting in the base until reinforcement came, and 15 out of 25 soldiers were killed. And at the end of the day, they found the Torah in the synagogue on the floor next to a terrorist. Someone shot him during the day. The terrorist tried stealing the Sefer Torah. That's the story that it says on the cover. So again, that's what drew me into the story. Why is this? I mean, we have a Torah. Every base has a shul and has a Torah. The Torah is even numbered. This is a military Torah, and you're signed. Every officer who gets a base signs for everything that's there. He needs to give it back. The Torah is the most expensive thing on the base. And you go close to it to check it's the right number, the serial number, it's all there. And we see the story. It says on it, the Sefer Torah was almost taken by Hamas terrorists on October 7th, Simchat Torah, and was saved by a miracle and by the heroism of the IDF soldiers, Am Yisrael Chai. Why would a terrorist in the middle of a battle go and try and take a Sefer Torah? I want to remind you, this broke out not on October 7th only, but on Simchat Torah. They knew what they were going for. They were going for the heart, they were going for the spirit, trying to take a Sefer Torah away from the base. Thank God he didn't succeed. The Sefer Torah was unharmed. Only the cover was covered with the terrorist blood, so they replaced it to a new one telling the story. But I feel it's the spirit of this battle, of this war. Friend sent me a picture from one of the homes in Gaza. Every house has a picture of Jerusalem, of Al-Aqsa. If our enemies are focused on Jerusalem, we need to understand this too. More important than everything else is the spirit of this war. And I think the young soldiers who see this in every house they go in are understanding better than many other experienced people today in Israel. The next chapter I wanted to talk about, it says, Am shel Giborei Al, a nation of superheroes. I decided to go back to my previous unit, which is called the Negev Brigade. It's an infantry unit, and it was hard enough for me to stay and be on call. At a certain point, we finished most of our work. So I called my previous commander, and I rejoined them from May down in the Negev. They were fighting in Gaza. I was in the headquarters of the unit. And I found there some of the most incredible. If you think of the young generation, I'm telling you, the people in Miluim have given up also their jobs. Some people lost their careers. These people you see in the picture with me, we got gifts over there, but some of these people were called up for the third, and some of them now for their fourth call up for Miluim, for reserve duty this year. They have families, wives, children, all of that is on hold because we understand we need to win this war for the next generations. Some of the heroes I want to mention, this is a meme that was going on social media. And it's the quote there is, this mom is only, quote unquote, staying at home with the kids. But the moms, I'll say Esti is here with me, but they were for an entire year. While I'll say we feel meaning with what we do, but how hard is it to know that you're just sending your kids to school today? You just packed a meal for them and made them go and continue on with life. And of course, the children. We tend to forget, but many adults, this year was tough. What about children? How did they go through this? How do you explain these things to them? It doesn't leave me. The moment on a Thursday, we were home, we got a message from our youngest, Ziv, he was 3. We got a message from his ganenet, his teacher in Gan. We need to explain, unfortunately, we need to explain to the kids not just about death, but Libby's father was killed in Gaza. How do you talk to kids about death, about war? And they've gone through this, and they hear the sirens. And I think these kids are heroes. Their moms are heroes. We have, in the unit I was, they decided to actually make shirts for the kids, to really acknowledge it. The picture I put up here is from the last day of year, just last year. Our son, who's in first grade, they called up all the kids that had a parent who went to Miluim this year, and they gave each one of them a certificate of a hero. This is half the class that stood up because their parents were called up to Miluim throughout the year. And these are my other friend heroes from my reserve duty. Again, if you look at their faces, you'll ask where their grandparents are from. They're also from all over. And what do they do in life, and where do they come from? They're from all different parts of the country. We even had guys from the US who flew in to be part of they asked to volunteer for Miluim. You speak to young Israelis, they flew in from a guy from Hong Kong, flew to Thailand to try and get back to be with his unit. People from all over were fighting over tickets to come back to Israel to defend the homeland. And another way of seeing this is by the sound track we have in Israel today. In the 90s, one of the most popular singers in Israel was a guy who didn't serve in the army, and he sang about peace. And today, you can see, I don't know if you recognize some of these faces. The guy on the right, top right corner, is Raviv Kanel, very popular singer in Israel today who serves in Miluim. He sings about those experiences. He was in Gaza. On the left is Idan Amedi, who's an actor in Fauda, but he's a real life warrior, commander, and these guys could easily get a celebrity discount. No, really, if they could get out, they could easily get out of Miluim. But these are the heroes. These are the songs that are being played on Israeli radio stations today. Old songs, Yoram Gaon, someone they recognize, of course. Oh, yeah. So his songs are songs my father heard as a child, but they've come back. Now there's a whole comeback of these songs talking about the spirit. Lo tenatzchuti. You won't defeat me. And that's the spirit that's coming up. Well, one of the new songs that came out in this war is a song which I think helps me answer a question. In the sources, there's a famous question, who's a hero? Ezu Gibor. There's an answer, of course, but I think the rabbis here can correct me. Sometimes the question is more important than the one answer you get. To continue the question, who is a hero? Ezu Gibor. And in one of the books I saw, it's someone who doesn't stand on the side. He acts when something happens. And all these people, the question is, the hero is something you're born with, or is it something you can become throughout your lifetime? Do heroes walk around with capes? Or people who just stood up at the right time to do the right thing? And that's what I've discovered. And the song that I want to end with is called Giborei Al, superheroes. And it came out now during the war, and I think it brings all of this together. You'll see the words are translated at the bottom, but it talks about regular, daily people who in one moment put on a uniform or an unseen cape and become the heroes of Israel.
עורכת דין מתאמצת, עושה משמרות בעבודה, אחי, אני שקר בכיר, עכשיו הוא צלף על גדות בצורה. מנהל את הסניף השוחה של הבנק ישראל ביהודה ושומרון. דורון הוא בעל חמוץ עצומים, עכשיו הוא נוטה בשירון. והמגיש שלנו קבלה, של הרוב מזמר בקיסריה. הוא לוחם הנדסה, מתאושש בגבורה, אחרי שנפצע בלב עזה. נכון כולם מילים רגילים, אבל אנחנו עם של גיבורי על. בכל אחד תמיד מסתתר חייל, מוכן להציל את העולם. יש תחנה באוטובוס שלנו, זה שתמיד עומד בזמן. הוא עכשיו מפקד סוללת תותחנים בדרום, ליד גרעם. יש סטודנט בטכניון, באמצע תואר ראשון. הוא סרן במילגות שפת הגליל כל חודש בגבול הצפון. יש פה דוגמנית פרמדיקית, יש פה חשמלאי שומניסט. יש את יומי נגן סקסופון מכונה שהוא קודם כל מטכליסט. יש את כולם ההומוניסטר, או הגז גדול מאוסר. יש פה סט שמתאים לכמעט מילואים, מוכנות תמיד לעיקר. נכון כולם מילים רגילים, אבל אנחנו עם של גיבורי על. בכל אחד תמיד מסתתר חייל, מוכן להציל את העולם.
I want to thank you again for having me over and allowing me to share with you what it meant for us to also success. Toda rabba, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to.
Wow. Sav, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Until a year ago, many of us thought another Holocaust could ever happen, right? Many people thought another Holocaust couldn't happen, and then it happened. And as you ended so beautifully and so eloquently, we need to learn from those amazing survivors of the last Holocaust, to learn how we continue to thrive as a nation, how to be truly an Am Yisrael Chai. So I want to conclude this beautiful evening with a call to action. But first, I guess soldiers say it with a song, Chabad rabbis say it with a story. So the final story of tonight is a Holocaust story, but it's short, but the message is for every one of us. There was a young man, his name was Matel Zatinsky, who was sadly the only survivor of his entire family in the hells of the concentration camps. And after the war, he ended up in a DP camp with no one else, the only survivor of his family. And he felt like his life was over. He had no one, he had nothing. He was a ghost of his former self. And as those around him were trying to rebuild their lives, he was helpless. He was in despair. And some of his friends said, come on, you got to start a new life. It's true, all your family is dead. And someone made a shidduch with a girl, a woman in the camp who had also lost her entire family. She too was the only survivor. They came from towns nearby. They had a similar upbringing, the same age. And they convinced these two to meet in the DP camp. And the shidduch was made and they agreed to get married. There was no parents to walk them down the chuppah. There was no band. There were no flowers. There was nothing, but a date was made. They had a rabbi, and the date was chosen for the wedding of this young matel. Comes the day of the wedding. Everyone is there, except for the chatan, except for the groom. He's nowhere to be found. And they're looking for him, and they're looking. It's getting late. He's not there. So they start searching. They're looking, and all the friends are running around. Where in the DP camp could he be hiding? Saying, we're going to search for someone you don't want to find. They did want to find him. And eventually they found him hiding in a closet, in a small little room. His head was in his hands, and he was sobbing and just sobbing uncontrollably. And they tried saying, Matel, Matel, they're waiting for you. And he wouldn't pick his head up. He wouldn't respond. Said, the Kala, the bride's waiting for you. The people are waiting. The rabbi's waiting. The chuppah's waiting. And nothing. And finally, one of the guys grabs him like, Matel, everyone's waiting for you. There's a chuppah. He picks up his head, his face soaked with tears. He says, Was chuppah? Vu chuppah? What chuppah? Where is there a chuppah? Who is my Mendele? Where's my Mendel? Who is my Masha? Who is my Pesha? He starts naming the family that he had lost behind. Telling me to go to a chuppah? And all he would repeat to himself, Was chuppah? Vu chuppah? Who is my Mendel? Who is my Pesha? Who is my Dalia? And he's mentioning the names of his family that were gone. How do you answer it? And so his friends just stood there dumbfounded. They didn't have an answer to that question. Where are they? That's a good question. They couldn't answer. And they're just standing there helplessly, silent in shock. And after a very intense minute of silence, all of a sudden this Matel banged on the table he was resting on with intensity. He jumped. And he screamed out loud, Aber Mirgain, but we're going. And even though he didn't have an answer to his question, he got up, wiped his face, and went to the chuppah. And he got married. And sure enough, he began the next chapter of his life, and he would indeed rebuild his family, his community, and his life. He became the Rosh Yeshiva of the Sfas Emes Yeshiva in Bnei Brak with hundreds of students who would go under his guidance in the years to follow. This, my friends, is the call of the hour. There are questions we don't know how to answer. Where are all these beautiful souls, 1,200, 1,800 now, that have been taken from us? And although we don't know how to answer the question, one thing as Jews we do know is Aber Megain. But we keep on going. We keep on going. Some of us are able to fight in the army and to fight on the front lines. Some of us are able to go to Israel in person and show our solidarity and support. And I'm blessed to be going in November with a group of men, some are here in the room, taking a trip to Israel. It's not too late to join us. But the rest of us that are here, that may feel like we're too far away to do anything, you should know that as Jews, we believe that we have the power to change reality, and therefore we never give in to despair. Aber Megain. Yes, we can answer the question, but we will continue and shining as proud Jews. And so this, my friends, is the call to action. We joined an international campaign called Project 10-7. Every one of you have it on your seats. Those that came in late, there's a few more here on the table. We'll give out a few extras. Project 10-7. And we were chosen to be the ones who, thank you. We were chosen to be the ones who will elevate 10 specific souls, 10 specific nishamot that were taken from us on October 7th. Their names, you'll see them on the back of the paper. I'm not going to share the stories now, although on Rosh Hashanah I shared 4 of their stories. And on Yom Kippur, during the course of Yom Kippur, I will share the rest of their stories. Their names are Nativ Kuzaro, Lieutenant Colonel Meidan Israel, Daniel Kasvachuk, Staff Surgeon Shahaf Nasani, Yonatan Alazari, Karin Vernikov, Damti, Lior Maimon, Maayan Kaliman, and Maya Hayim. Those 10 beautiful souls, every one of them, except for one is in their 20s, Medan Israel is 35, and each one is another story. Each one left behind another family, but each one has a beautiful neshama whose yahrzeit is coming up on Simchat Torah. And our mission here is to recognize that every one of us can be superheroes. Every one of us can do our little part in lighting the light that is able to overcome darkness. And the darkness is not physical darkness, it's spiritual darkness. And therefore, the answer is spiritual light. If you go into this little booklet, you'll see 10 different options. Choose at least one that you'll do 7 times. 10, 7. Between now and Simchat Torah, which is the day of the yard site. You can go onto onemitzvah.org/Coral Springs. If you're watching this at home online, you can go to onemitzvah.org/Coral Springs. That is our community's joint page for the city of Coral Springs. You go to onemitzvah.org/Coral Springs, you'll see all of these options of mitzvot that every one of us can take in some way that we can all grow, myself included. To choose something on here that we're not yet doing, and you don't have to make a lifelong commitment to be a superhero. You need to do it 7 times. 7 times. And influence 7 other people. Think about what you can do and what you can share with others. Go online, fill it out, and together our community will reach our 1,800 mitzvah goal for these 10 beautiful neshamot. So that is our first call to action. Asking every one of you to bring the beauty and inspiration tonight to practicality by taking upon yourself a mitzvah. I'll just read, I saw a beautiful letter from a soldier who was on the front lines. And he wrote a letter to the Jews of the world, and he says that we are your messengers in battle. We fight so you can live in peace. Mission knowing some of us will not return, but will ascend to heaven as Elijah the prophet did. And we ask that you be our protection. Through your prayers, through your mitzvot. Protect us by going beyond yourselves through spirituality and good deeds. That, my friends, is what we can do. And my final closing point to all of you as we end this evening is that in a week from this Thursday is going to be the holiday of Simchat Torah, which is the actual yard site and the actual anniversary on the Hebrew calendars for the atrocities of October 7th. And the question is, how will we mark a day that is traditionally observed with dancing and celebration and happiness and joy, and knowing that it was on that very day 1 year ago that so much pain and suffering was inflicted upon our people? Can we dance with broken hearts? And the answer is not only that we could, but we must dance stronger than we have ever danced before. That is Am Yisrael Chai. Not only we can dance with broken hearts, we must dance with our broken hearts. And so I'm going to strongly encourage everyone not only to show up at whatever Chabad you see, there's different Chabad programs happening on the flyers. We're doing a special kids program on Wednesday night, brand new program for kids on Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then, of course, on Thursday, both here in our Chabad University Drive, a special Israeli program as well. The information is here. Bring your family with you. Bring your children and your grandchildren. Let them see how we celebrate our enduring legacy of truth and holiness. Let them see what it means. Yisrael Chai. One last closing video, and with that, we will end tonight's program. We're going to thank you to Yaron for the technical support here.
How will we commemorate the massacre that occurred last Simchat Torah? Should we cry or should we dance? One of the most brutal massacres of Jewish history was the destruction of the metropolis of Beitar by the Roman legions. The Jerusalem Talmud records that they slaughtered Jews until their horses bring blood up to their mouths. Emperor Hadrian forbade the Jews access to it. It wasn't until Emperor Antonius took the throne that we were permitted to gather and bury the bodies. This was a deliberate effort after the Bar Kokhba revolt, 56 years after the destruction of Jerusalem, to finally crush the Jewish spirit. But it did not. Why? Thanks to the wisdom and spirit of our sages. How did they decide to commit the massacre? Well, until then, when Jews would thank God for their bread, they would say three blessings. The sages added a fourth, praising God for being good and doing, because the bodies had not decomposed and they received their proper burial. You say that blessing to this day. But what about the tragedy and the outrage? If God is good, why did you allow such a thing to happen? They put all that aside because they knew the very existence of the nation was at stake. Tears and outrage out of place, but they won't save the people from extinction. Gratitude for every ray of hope. Yeah. Our sages know, when you tell a story, think about your children will hear. Because memory is not about the past, it's the structure upon which we build the future. You can't build a beautiful future on an edifice of tears, but you can build it by celebrating our resilience, our love for Torah and for one another. That is Simchat Torah, which is why we need to dance and sing this year with greater joy than ever before. That will be our victory against our enemies which to crush our spirit. As the Romans eventually learned, they and their horses will perish into the dust of this year, while we will dance and sing until the whole world dances with us.
Thank you very, very much for joining us. It was truly a beautiful evening. Thank you, Asaf and Essie, for coming. All of our sponsors, to all of us. Thank you to the mayor and to Vice Mayor Joy Carter here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Laila Tov. Good night. Thank you.